Hello, my friends. Liberty Garden, Saturday, May 28th, last Saturday of the month. And this current week, we had a very, very ugly tragedy here in Texas, Uvalde, Texas. Just as a point of reference, Uvalde is not the border. It is about 60 miles to the border. So it's not the border, Uvalde. I hear a lot of people say that the Uvalde is at the border. It's not. Okay, that out of the way. I've been to Uvalde. It's a nice little town. There's a state park there called Gardner State Park. Water is cold. You go tubing and stuff like that. One of the first vacations I took as a kid was to Uvalde, Texas. It's a nice, quiet place. It's one of those communities where probably the people living there, mostly Hispanics, were probably there before Texas was even part of the Union. It's an old community. And something horrible happened there this week. It's incomprehensible. I don't really understand how we got to this point. How is it that these kind of things can happen? And especially to kids, that have really no awareness of such dangers. They shouldn't have. So, and immediately, the issue gets politicized, and everywhere you go, and every forum you go visit, there's usually your two usual sides, the liberals and the conservatives, or whatever you want to call it, the conservatives these days. They're equally woke on both sides, and they're equally Karen-esque on both sides by the way they deliver themselves, by the way they express themselves, by the way they argue, by the way that a lot of effeminate people on both sides. And you have your normal arguments, the liberals are peddling for more gun control, because to them it's the ends justify the means. They're not really concerned about the babies, like they call them. They're concerned about more gun control, and this is a good opportunity for them to beat the drum. And of course, the conservatives immediately got on the defensive, and they start saying the usual arguments. Well, a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun, and blah 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 blah. And the same thing. We've heard all this shit again, time and time again. Not necessarily true, not necessarily false. The fact is that what happened. It's water under the bridge at this point. It cannot be undone. But the solutions being offered by both sides, and inevitably take liberty away from citizens, from Americans. The left wants to take guns away, basically take your guns, Second Amendment violations. And the right wants to turn schools into small prisons. I mean, they already look like prisons from the outside. And in schools like where I'm at, you can't go in there without going through two sets of doors and being rung in and everything like that. Because that's just the nature of the beast these days, right? And of course, if we only had one more cop, or we only had one veteran that's unemployed guarding the school, or all kinds of nonsense that I keep hearing, especially the last one about the veterans. There's this meme going around about, well, there's so many veterans that could use a job guarding the school. I don't think people have thought that one through. And nothing against veterans, but don't construe that as being something against veterans. But quite frankly, in a high school, in a elementary school, you may not need somebody that came from Afghanistan or from some war in that place. There's all kinds of issues with people that are veterans that are PTSD related. There are reasons why a lot of them are unemployed these days. Some of them can't hold a job. They get serious mental issues, and I wish they would get addressed. And that's another problem in the United States. Now, I'm not calling them baby killers or any of that. No, 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 no. None of that, okay? So don't construe what I'm saying here something against the veterans, but I'm saying they may not be the best people to be on point at a school, right? And I'm not sure having more people at a school is going to make much of a difference. More armed people at the school is going to make much of a difference. Or, another one I hear, well, we need to metal detectors at every school, and we need this and we need that. It's like everything that we need apparently reduces your liberty. Apparently turns the school more into a prison-like system. It grows the government one side or the other. And the last thing you want after a tragedy like this is grow the government. What the hell for? We are here in part because of the government. So we need to come up with solutions. We need to figure out what the hell is churning out little monsters like this son of a bitch that went into the school. What's costing these guys? What's costing the guy from Buffalo to drive 200 miles to a black community with an AR rifle? I mean, he could have taken an AK, he could have taken a couple of Glocks. I know he had to take an AR rifle, AR type of rifle, and go after a minority. And then what made this guy one day wake up and go buy some rifles and then go shoot up a school in a couple of weeks? That's the problem we need to address. What's kind of creating these monsters in society? That question, until we answer that question, everything else is just posturing and being defensive about your gun rights or being defensive about your intentions to control guns more from the people from people. It's not solutions. We need to follow the money. And nobody's asking these questions because everybody's afraid to ask them. Everybody wants a nice, simple answer that you can just package and push it down your forums or pushing it down Twitter or push it down Facebook or share with your buddies or with your family or whatever. But nobody's asking the serious questions. Nobody wants to ask them. I'm sure they're in the minds of everybody. And nobody's really asking, how do these monsters come about? How do they get created? Who created them? I mean, you take this guy, for example. I mean, he killed 20 some people, 19 children, 2 teachers, etc. He was very good with the rifle. Now you say, well, it's like when you close the door and you're inside a room full of children, it's like shooting fish in a bucket. I mean, with all due respect to the victims. And that is true, but when you haven't run a rifle, which I assume this guy hadn't because he just turned 18 and he bought those rifles. And his family didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and his grandfather was a felon, so he couldn't have guns in the house. You gotta ask yourself, where did this guy learn to run a rifle like that? Where did he get the practice? Was it video games? I mean, I understand video games. Maybe video games get a little bit desensitize you a little bit to shooting other characters in the game, but video games are not really a replacement for an actual training of a rifle. I mean, when you hear that the AR go off, it's loud, and when you hear it inside a room, it's very loud. And when you hit somebody and you see their guts splatter all over the room, and you see another one, I mean, who took the sensitivity out of this guy? Who taught him how to manage such a high body count without any remorse, without feeling anything? How does a civilian, this guy was a civilian, go from civilian to beast? He shot the grandma in the face. I'm thinking probably the grandma saw him trying to get out of the house with a couple of rifles, and they got into an argument and he shot her. But we keep calling it mental illness. My favorite word. Oh, it's mental illness. We need to address mental illness. They're right always saying we need to address the mental illness problem in this country. Well, and of course they laugh. Well, we need to get rid of the guns. That way the crazies can't kill people, even if they're crazy. two stupid arguments, right? Because I mean, we saw what happened in what was it, Waukesha, Wisconsin, or something like that. Some guy ran with an SUV, ran a parade, and he stacked up a high body count too with an SUV. So where there's a way, there's a will. That's not the solution. But we keep calling things by the wrong name. We keep calling this mental illness. It's mental illness. When I was growing up, a block away from my house, there was a family. They had four men and one woman. Of the four men were crazy, mental ill patients. I mean, they could have been easily belonged to a loony house, and the woman was okay. Now these guys, when I say woman, I mean we were about 10, and these guys, the oldest guy was about 25, and from there on downwards, right? So the youngest guys were about our age. The oldest guy, the firstborn, he could hold a job, and he was a very nice person, but he was not all there. We could call him a mental retard. He had some level of retardation, and he was not all there. But he was a mechanic. He helped in a mechanic shop. He washed he washed the parts and stuff like that. He held the job, and if you called him in the mornings to go work with you, he would work with you, and he was a hard worker, and he earned a living. Not aggressive, very nice guy, always willing to work, always willing to help you, but he was not all up there. The second after him, that guy had some kind of, I don't know, the guy kind of sat cross-legged all day long on his front porch, just swinging back and forth and moving his hands like doing this the whole time. And he was completely gone. And that guy, all he did was beg, and if it was a woman, he was begging for him, and she said no or ignored him, he would get angry and chase her. And if it was a guy, he would just kind of not do anything, because he was crazy but not stupid. He knew his limits. Then you had the woman, the sister. She was normal. And then you had the other guy below her. And that guy, another guy that probably belonged to a loony house, but except they were not violent, right? He was not violent. So you could tell him, hey, dig a hole right there with a shovel, and he would dig he would put the shovel in the ground 2-3 times and stop. And then just kind of look at the trees and look at the, completely dysfunctional. We try to incorporate him into our games because he was about our age. We try to, hey, you want to play some soccer? You want to play ball, whatever? Useless. Could not do it. And then the youngest one, who was also, that guy had the stare of a psychotic, he had a psychotic stare in him. I mean, that guy was just, he would not even talk. He would just look at you weird. And completely dysfunctional too. I mean, could not do anything. Could not survive on his own, other than by begging or stuff like that. Could not hold a job. Those guys, I consider mental ill. Those guys could not plan and execute a mass murder. Okay? Mentally ill people do not have the ability to plan, execute anything. They're gone. Mentally, they're not there. They live in the present, and that's it. The other type of people you have, the other kind of psychotics that you have is the psychopaths, right? I'm talking the Jeffrey Dahmers of the world. Those sons of bitches are off the charts smart, and they're not going to storm into a school and shoot it up, right? Those are another kind of illness. And those guys are very careful. They're very, very, very weird, twisted, deviant. I mean, probably possessed by a demon or something. But they're not stupid. They're not going to get caught. I mean, serial killers, for example, the authorities take a long time to catch these guys. Sometimes they never catch them because they're cautious. They kill every 3-4 years. They have a pattern. They have a plan. They execute flawlessly. Those are the other guys. But then we have these monsters that are popping up, and people are calling, oh, they're mental ill because they're taking pills. Taking pills doesn't make somebody mentally ill. Okay, taking pills for depression, taking pills for being, what's it called, the kids are these overactive kids that they're giving pills in school for some reason. That doesn't make you mentally ill. I mean, the mental illness is a whole different thing, and mentally ill people can't execute like these guys do. I mean, we need to call these people by what they are. They are freaking brainwashed zombies. They are not mentally ill people. These guys, somebody did a number on them. Somebody took some weak-minded individual from society that would otherwise be a functional individual, brainwashed the shit out of this person, and let them loose on society. I have no other explanation for this. And until we find out how or who is doing this, we're not going to solve the problem. But nobody wants to talk about that. Why? Because, well, you're a fucking loony, you're a conspiracy theorist, like stuff like that. Watch the movie Conspiracy Theory with Julia Roberts and Mel Gibson. Yeah, that thing was ahead of its time. But somebody's taking hold of these people and getting them ready for this, to do something. I mean, just follow the money. Where did this kid get a Daniels defense rifle? And I think the one was Smith & Wesson. Both had very nice optics on them. I mean, the glass alone was probably as much as the gun. EOTechs, and EOTechs make it so easy to acquire targets. Also, where do you get the money from? I mean, I think he had a job at Wendy's, and at the present time when he committed this, he was not even working. Where did he get he easily was rocking $4,000 in weaponry, at least $4,500 between the bullets, the two guns, and the eyepieces. Where do you get that kind of money from? Well, I mean, did he have a bank account? Did he have a credit card? Did he just like found a bag of cash somewhere? I mean, he's living with the grandma and the grandfather, and the way I heard their house described was a bungalow. I mean, it can't be that great. It's not like you can hide money from your grandparents that easily, especially in that kind of need. So you have to question these things, and until you address that elephant in the room that nobody wants to address. I mean, people tiptoe around it. And I don't mean by nobody, I don't mean like people in this community that we talk about these things. I mean, nobody in society, mainstream society. You can clear a room if you even hint at this. People just walk away from you, right? Because people do not want to even imagine the horror of being of somebody creating these monsters, but they're being created. They're not crazy. They're not crazy. They're not mentally ill guys. These guys are brainwashed zombies. That's what they are. And that's what we need to address. How are they coming about? If you look back at history, I went to the University of Texas. I think I went there, I was 92, and then I graduated whenever that happened. 91, 92, somewhere around that time. And the University of Texas shooter was a thing back then, right? That was the biggest mass shooting we had in the history of the country, I think. And for the longest time, there was nothing happened. Nothing happened for the longest time. And then we got Columbine. Maybe there was a few in between there, small ones, but then the next big one was Columbine. And those guys got treated like rock stars. Everybody was parading their names and stuff like that. And of course, everybody's acting indignant. But all the media, they're freaking lusting for blood. And after Columbine, you started seeing more frequent these kinds of attacks. Now it's become normal. Now you can expect 2 or 3 a year at least. It is quite normal now, right? Interesting little fact. I believe that when the Columbine shooting happened, it was a week before the NRA convention in Colorado. I guess history repeats itself. I don't know, folks. But, those poor children, I say, everybody says pray for them. They are with God at this point. They don't need prayers. Their parents need prayers. Their parents have been sunken into an abyss that's so dark and deep. I cannot even imagine losing children like that. It is just inexplicable. I'm not going to go into the cowardly way that the cops acted outside the school. That's a whole different story. and also a very that deserves in itself an investigation. Why the hell did they stand down for so long? But pray for the parents. Pray for the parents. Pray for their families. I mean, that small town has been blighted for decades to come because everybody has a friend, a relative. It was an aunt, an uncle, a mother, a grandmother of one of those kids. There's only 16,000 people in that little town, and that town has been blighted for decades. Pray for them. Pray for America. I mean, God damn it, we need to ask the right questions. We need to catch. I mean, we need to get to the bottom of these things. This is not right.